Welcome to Hollywood and Sip. I'm your host, Kat Smith. And with me today, I have Jay Rooke, who is a business coach, among many other things, father of twins, and his No Pain, No Gain, and that's KNOW. Like if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it on the banner in the background. But if you're listening on the radio, it's not the word no, it's no, as in you know pain and you know gain. Entrepreneurship Made Real. And we're over 100 episodes later, so congratulations.
Thank you so much, Kat, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show. I really appreciate getting to be here with your listeners today.
And so I mentioned you're a business coach, and I've done a mastermind with you, which was really awesome. And we did most of that online. So I imagine that in this time, you could easily still be doing that.
Yeah, actually, funny you should mention, I just kicked off a new mastermind group related to my podcast and some of the sponsors with that. So absolutely, I think masterminds lend themselves really well to virtual scenarios. And especially now when folks, A, there's no other option, and B, folks are craving connection more than ever.
Yeah, so at the end of the show, we'll give you all information on how to find out all of that stuff. But for now, let's start with, who are you?
Who am I? A question I ask myself often these days. Um, yeah, so I think the sort of cutting edge of where I'm at now is leaning into uh, trying to help raise the consciousness of others. And so helping both myself and others learn how to navigate some of those journeys, learn how to get better levels of awareness with ourselves, harness intuition more, get into cleaner decision making, and kind of filter out some of the noise of now. So, and then as that relates to entrepreneurship and our higher callings and weaving all of those in. So I would say I am a work in progress like all of us, but right now that's kind of the area that I'm playing around with. And I'm also having a lot of fun leaning into writing lately. And I've been working on a book about the humorous aspects of parenting during the pandemic. So that's been the pet project lately.
Oh, that's brilliant, because I follow your Facebook feed and every day you are cracking me up with your parenting stories. So it just makes sense that you would turn that into a book. That's brilliant.
Thanks so much.
So how did the podcast come about?
The podcast came about because at the time I was hosting a startup grind chapter here in Sonoma where I would host monthly entrepreneurial gatherings. And the tax of getting butts and seats on a monthly basis was just a lot of time and money. And boy, monthly production's hard, especially in that instance. I was doing it all solo and without, particular, huge team in place or anything. And so from a cost standpoint and from a time standpoint, it just wasn't working for me anymore. But I had learned that I loved to interview. And so as I was figuring out how to wind down Startup Grind, I realized, wait, I could just perfectly parlay this into a podcast. And then I take care of all the live issues. But I also get to expand the audience instead of just to who's in town, but to an international one. And so that was the inspiration for making that format work. And then the content, what I was inspired by was that I had a restaurant back in 2011 that had failed. And when I was doing the postmortem and trying to figure out what went wrong, I realized to think like an entrepreneur at that time. And I think there's just a lot of false prophets and sort of BS marketing gurus out there in the space right now talking about entrepreneurship and making it look easy. And I wanted to have a forum where we could talk about the real aspects of what it's actually like to be an entrepreneur or a small business owner, and get advice and learn how to navigate those waters without having to go through all the pain steps.
So let's go over a little bit of the journey to 100 podcasts. What did you learn at the start that you maybe didn't think of going in? And were there any mistakes?
Of course, there were mistakes. My favorite mistake is probably episode number 1, where I got this guy, Brian Wilson, the Texas Law Hawk, who's this hilarious marketer down in Texas. And he's gotten big notoriety for what he's done in his creative work. And I was so excited to talk to him. So do you swear on your show?
Well, I can bleep it because,
Yeah, fair
we're
enough.
pre-recording
Gotcha.
for the radio, but it'll be on YouTube. So however you want to do it, I can fix it.
Deal. We're about 7 minutes into the conversation and I just go, God damn it. And I look down and I realize I haven't been recording at all. And so it was such a painful first interview moment. And, I could just feel the heat in my face. And he's like, hey, listen, dude, no big deal. He's like, at least it was 7 minutes in and not 50 minutes in. And we just started over. And so since then, I have 2 rules at the start of all podcasts. Is it the recording on, and do I have my timer set? So I'll throw that in the mistake category. And then your other question
Before you
was,
move on to the
yeah.
next one, I can top that. So
Uh-oh.
as you know, we're both hosts on KSBY in Sonoma. And obviously we're making a shift to recording from home because we're not allowed in the station, right?
Yeah.
I had that same thing because we're all learning the technology. We're all learning the
Right.
Zoom. We're used to the radio board and being in the station. I did one of the best interviews of my life. I was so proud of it. And at the end, the little box didn't pop up saying that it was converting the file.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh no. And I looked all over my hard drive. It's not there.
Yeah.
I didn't record. And then I had to sheepishly, oh my gosh, you're not
So
going to believe
painful.
what it's so painful. And then we had it. He was so nice. He was so wonderful. And it was somebody I actually knew, which made it slightly easier, but
Right.
also made it even more embarrassing. And so the next day we tried to recreate the whole interview again. And it was just as good. It was different. It was just as good. But yes, now the number one rule is check that upper corner to see if it says recording.
Yes, totally. Sorry, man. That sucks.
Oh, that sucked. But it's okay. That's what we're all learning and going through together. So if you're thinking about a podcast,
noticing that. Totally. And I'm noticing that a lot with all of my sort of professional interactions right now, is that everyone's giving each other so much more permission and slack than we ever used to, as far as not having to show up with whatever we think our veneer of professionalism is, and getting to be more real. And I've actually really enjoyed it. I think it's been super healthy for all of us.
Yeah. So the other half of that question was, what did you learn going into it that you maybe didn't think about when you started that podcasting journey?
Yes. I would say the amount of time involved. There, beyond the interview itself, there is so much work on the front end of prepping and getting the scheduling done, and then on the back end with the promoting and editing and all of that work. So if you're thinking about launching a podcast out there, just know that it can be a significant investment of time if you're shooting for something like weekly production. And I think the cost as well. So it's probably my most significant line item budget in my business.
Oh, interesting. This is not even on my question list. What are some of the costs that you have that go into having the podcast?
Yes. So for me, the amount of time that I would be investing in audio and video editing would just be a train wreck, and I do it poorly anyway. So I outsource that. I've got a team that does all the show notes, the marketing, the social media. We've got it also as a syndicated radio show that's a pay-to-play type of option. So there's that cost. And then just all the monthly SaaS fees that kind of start to add up sneakily. It's $7 here and $15 there, and all of a sudden, it's a couple $100 going in. So it's a lot of that behind the scenes work, and then taking the podcast and doing something with it. I think that was probably something that I also didn't give a lot of attention to on the front end. I think I had more of a, hey, if I just record it, they will listen to it type mentality. And then you realize, hey, it's just a piece of content like everything else out there. You've got to do something to get it in front of people and get them to engage with it.
Yeah. And now you're at over 50,000 downloads, or nearing 50,000 downloads. So you made it to editor's pick for Podcast Magazine. So what was that moment like for you?
That was super exciting. It felt great to get recognized, and just sort of that sense of validation, because there's a term out there called podcast fatigue. So many people launch a podcast, but very few really keep it going long term. And I think at spots along the way where maybe I was not seeing the value of what I was doing, or couldn't see what was next, I was just saying to myself, should I keep this going? Should I just kind of kill this? Was it a fun run and a good experiment, but whatnot? And so ended up having a change of heart and decided to push on. And then, that came through not so much later. So that was a fun, just external validator of like, all right, we're on to something here.
Love it. I wrote a note down in talking about your journey in when you're talking in writing, you have a tendency to capitalize the word truth. What power comes from capitalizing that word for you?
Haha, very observant, very observant. I think for me, what I've been paying attention to a lot in my own path is what are those sort of true with a capital T truths that we come across that let us know that we're in the essence of where we're supposed to be? I think one of the largest challenges many of us have with the modern world is that you can be anybody you want to be, and everything's so fluid, and there's so much opportunity, and uh, zone or not zoning out, filtering out a lot of that noise and distraction so that you can purely see who you actually are and then express that into the world versus the watered down version that most of us are working with around being sort of too distracted and sort of in everybody else's business but our own. And so for me, that's those moments where it's something truly cornerstone or foundational for somebody that we're starting to lean into and know also, like, I think there's a big awareness and consciousness shift that we're working through on a macro level right now. And so I think we're just going to start to see people understanding and seeing those things that are real versus the sort of plastic cheap things that we started to get a little bit too much of appreciation for.
And that falls in line with my next question, which was a lot of people are reinventing themselves right now. They're taking advantage of this opportunity while being out of work, maybe learning that they want to learn about new subjects or, just shifting. Everybody's kind of in a shift right now. So how can your podcast, from your journey to the journeys of the people that you interview, how can that help them out in refocusing in that shift?
Oh, that's a fun question because I actually think that's a really ideal spot for somebody to engage with my podcast with, specifically because so many of our conversations are around what went wrong and what didn't we know at that time that we would tell our former selves, or, hey, now I know how to think about it and this is what I would do different. And so, I'll blanketly say that I think most folks would agree that entrepreneurship is like sex. You can talk about it a lot beforehand, but until you've actually had the experience, it's radically different than what you initially envisioned it as. And so to be able to have that window into listening to where you might see yourself getting snagged, kind of self-recognizing yourself in some of the interviews and being like, oh yeah, that's the type of thing that I would do. Or yeah, I have that tendency to kind of do that squirrel thing and chase after whatever shiny and new, and talking about how that might hurt my business. So I think twofold would be my answer. One is listen to it and see if you like how that stuff sounds. If you haven't gone down this journey yet and you've been an employee most of your life, just listening to what some of those experiences are, what that emotional journey is like, and seeing, hey, is this something that I'm interested in, or, ooh, no, that's definitely not for me. And then the other one would be using some of the interviews as a muse for somebody to kind of see themselves in some of these opportunities or vignettes or journeys, and start to use that to kind of mold what they might think their journey might look like.
And that's the kind of cool thing about your show too, is I enjoy listening to it week to week, but there's guests that you have that like really resonate with me because either they're in the same field as I am or they're going through something that I am. And I'll go back and I'll pick and choose through the various guests for a re-listen because it's something that I can really put into action from listening to it again. So you can kind of do it both ways. You can listen all the way through, or you can pick and choose the people who speak to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. And then, so 100 episodes, do you have some favorite moments from the filming or recording of all of these? Like, was there a guest that you particularly fangirled over, or was there
Right.
something that unexpected that happened that you still remember?
Unfortunately, I don't have any like crazy, like someone walked naked behind me while recording type stories, but uh, I will say that I'm amused at the number of friends that I've made out of it. And when I say that, I mean folks that I didn't know at all prior to the interview, that I didn't really particularly have a ton of interaction with after the interview, but you would just connect with somebody. And over the course of 45 minutes, because of the realness and rawness of the conversation, you get to see somebody's authenticity really well. And there's a lot of like real recognized real, or like, I can't put my finger on it, but I like your energy and let's stay in each other's worlds and that type of thing. So that's been one of the things that I've had a lot of fun with and appreciated about it. And then I guess the other would be, one of the benefits of being a podcast host is I feel like you get access to people that might be a rung or two above where you're playing at in your own business at times. And so getting some cool guests on the show that were way ahead of where I am in the entrepreneurial journey, and getting to hear how they think and feel through things has been a real benefit to myself. There's times where I feel like oftentimes the guest on my show feel like they were divinely sent to me to help me with a problem that I was having at that time that they just happened to be an expert in.
Oh, wow. And that was a nice segue into my next question was, um, you personally, because I think part of this is you giving back to people, but part of it is also your yearning for knowledge and to have people mentor you, and it's a good way to do it by having conversations with people. Are there some lessons that you remember that really went into your own life or your own business?
So yeah, I would say there was also one with Amy Schuber that was particularly fun to do. And lastly, I would say Karen Rowe, Rowe. And the reason being is she's a writer's coach that helps people get their first books going. I know how many people are sort of considering doing something like that right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I was just thinking, in flipping the script and having somebody interview you, probably not in the moment of being interviewed, but in listening back, did you discover anything in your story that maybe surprised you, or just something, a light bulb that came off that you didn't know was there?
Yeah, I cried like a little baby
Oh, did
re-listening to it.
you?
Oh yeah, it was like projectile tears. It was really interesting to note kind of my entire story arc and realize how much of those things I had been either suppressing or compartmentalizing for a long time. And my aha moment, I was like, oh wow, like I'm really proud of this guy. I got to see the full arc, whereas I was more in the shame mentality of a business not working out for a much longer time. So kind of getting to see the holistic picture was a nice perspective reset for how I related to myself.
Ah, that's amazing. And another thing that you always say is that I've made all the mistakes so that you don't have to. So have you really made all the mistakes, and are you done yet?
Haha, great question. I would say I'm evolving into different types of mistakes. So I think that that aspect of I think one of the ways that I've learned to like uh, how to view what I do is kind of like going out there and learning things and getting bumped around and then like coming back and sharing, here's what I learned from this mission and this part of the journey and that type of thing. So I think we'll see that as a theme or a dynamic for me indefinitely. But no, I do not think I've made all of the mistakes, but a lot of the ones that are critical to those first steps, I think I've got most of those out of the way.
Well, I thought before we wrap up that maybe if there's people out there who are considering starting a podcast, maybe we could go over a couple of the technical things. Like,
Love to.
let's see, what was your biggest hurdle to getting started? And that could just be mental also. It doesn't have to be technology. And how do you think others could avoid it?
So for me, 1,000,000% was two things I'll say. One is check out newmediasummit.net. And if you end up attending, tell Steve Olsher I sent you. It's just an awesome forum to launch a podcast. And he hosts like 3 or 4 of these each year. And it's basically, get your podcast built in a box type of thing and learn from best practices from all these industry experts. And it's a huge booster. Other thing that I would say is get somebody on your team that has done all of this before. So a lot of this can be outsourced. So like I work with a team in the Philippines that does a lot of my post-production work. And although it costs money, it's reasonable relative to the amount of time that you're going to take learning it and still doing a poor job, and you're just going to get buried with it. So what I was fascinated with when I started working with my team there is prior to them, it was the blind leading the blind as far as I was trying to learn the stuff and do it. And then I got introduced to them and they're like, oh yeah, we already do this for 9 other successful podcasters. So here's, you want to do this, then do this, then do this. And it was all these things that I didn't even know about that they just took care of behind the scenes. That was hands down the thing that was a huge proponent to my growth.
And I was going to ask you about that because I know that you outsource a lot. One, what is a good way to find people for that? And also, for anything that you do on your own or services that you purchase to have them use for you, do you have any favorite services or technology that you use in creating and getting the podcast out there?
Yes. So let's go. First question, which was around advice for finding these folks. I would say Upwork and Fiverr are pretty great for this, as is LinkedIn. And looking for podcast production would probably be the term of art that you're looking for. And it's not hugely complicated, meaning that, somebody's got good AV technician skills, they can get the work done. But kind of going to my prior point, if you can get somebody that's already doing this for a lot of other podcasters, you're just going to accelerate your learning curve and get best practices down a lot faster. So I would say to look for folks that are already doing this for others, and or reaching out to some of your favorite podcast hosts and asking who they use. And so, it's super fun to have your own intro and outro recorded and those types of things.
Right.
And then to your other question, so resources and technology that has helped a lot along the way to get things out there. I swear by Zoom, obviously, for all of those obvious reasons. We use Buffer to do social media scheduling so that calendar all gets baked in advance.
Well, and it helps if you're outsourcing, they probably have their own stuff that they like to use or have
Right.
favorited themselves. But, every little bit helps somebody else get started.
Totally. I will say getting a legit podcast production calendar down, or spreadsheet rather, where you just track like everything that needs to get done, soup to nuts, and like, hey, did this get posted yet? And did the guest get notified? And here's the guest email address, and here's the Dropbox for the file, and those types of things, and having it all in one central location certainly helps.
Yeah, so spreadsheets, I know how to use them. I've never really gotten into them. One of my tips is I like to use Asana for, have you tried Asana? I like
Yeah,
using a
great stuff.
project management tool because I'm really visual. And I think the thing about spreadsheets is they're very just black and white. It's just there. So I like to be
Right.
able to move things around and, interact with it. So that's another tip
Totally
from
get it.
me.
I
Um,
like
Looking at your website, I saw that you're doing something new. What are your jaywalking sessions?
Yeah, so super fun. I was trying to realize, hey, how do I reconnect with my work a little more resonant for myself? I feel like my over the years, my practice had gotten a touch stale as far as I felt a little corporate in what was going on and how I was marketing myself. And I really wanted to do more experiential work and less sort of traditional one-on-one coaching sessions. And so what I found is that with newer clients, or when I would go on my own coaching calls with my coaches, I always wanted to go for a walk and get out of the house and get out in nature and move around. And I found that I would focus more. I wouldn't distract myself with the phone or email, and I could really sit and hear myself and get to the truth of what was real for me at that moment, or whatever it might be. And so the more I thought about it, I was like, well, wait, this actually enhances the sessions and makes the whole experience better. And I was worried about people perceiving it as kind of almost like non-professional or something like that. If I flip it just felt more authentic and fun. And so basically the deal is that it's an hour and a half session where I go for a walk in the woods or the vineyards or whatever it might be. And the client is on their end, ideally invited to go and have that same experience for themselves somewhere that's special in nature for them. And when we hash out whatever's kicking for them, whether that's a feedback session or me being amused or helping them just have that third party feedback on a big decision that they might be making.
And we touched on your masterminds a little bit at the beginning. Do you have any starting soon or just in the planning phases? What do you have coming up there?
I'd say in the planning phases. I think what I'm going to do is ride out, the rest of this year and just kind of ride the horse that's going and keep things pretty wash, rinse, repeat, with a keen eye towards how is all this going to unfold and reopen, and planning on putting something together for early 2021.
And finally, you have twins at home, tiny twins. How are you dealing with staying at home orders?
Yeah, so it's a super challenge. And I think that's also why I don't want anything else on my plate right now for this year, starting anything new. Um, it's a challenge, and we just got the notice recently, that it's all going to be online for the fall. I think it was a heavy blow to just about all parents, even though we obviously want to respect the safety of things and not go that route. But it was just kind of that final surrender of like, yep, this is going to go on for a few more months. So it's been a huge challenge, and it's been a huge blessing. And the slowing down of everything, kind of going back to the commentary about truth with a capital T earlier, has really helped me to see through the noise of some of the stuff that I was doing that I don't want to bring back into my life, and sort of unnecessary obligations, and that constant busyness and the addiction to the busyness and all that type of stuff. And so in that way, the slowing down has been a real blessing for me.
Awesome. Well, we have been talking to Jay Rooke, who is a businessman, a business coach, an entrepreneur, and host of No Pain, No Gain podcast, which is celebrating more than 100 episodes. How can people find you if they want to work with you? How can they find the podcast and anything else you want to give out and share?
Really appreciate that. So they can find me at jayrooke.com. And that's where I've got the jaywalking sessions and the links to the podcast. The podcast is also on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and anywhere where you can access podcasts. We probably are, as well as YouTube channel.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Kat, thank you so much. And I really appreciate, thank you to all your listeners for tuning in today. I appreciate it.
Awesome.